sort of some people's initial thoughts on what this stuff looks like? Anything off the bat? Yeah, Adrian.
It looks like you might be able to I don't know, like call it somewhere or request it somewhere and then get a bunch of like stuff that you can access. Like, I feel like I want to stick it in like the head of something. I don't know where to put it.
Yeah, we're gonna learn exactly where to put it soon enough. But yeah, that's exactly right. So really, it's just a list of data that then we can eventually access once we start using it. Yep. Any other thoughts, Jeff?
They're all radically different from each other.
Sorry?
They're all radically different from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of them look very different. Yeah, so like there's no necessarily like standard formatting for how people like lay out their JSON data or their API data. Yeah, good one. Any thoughts on just like the URLs themselves? Yeah, Ryan.
They were very similar to like how we did our Rails apps.
Yeah, exactly. Especially like maybe the Star Wars one, right? Yeah, it's literally just like people through. It's exactly right. Yeah, so it's very similar. The way it's built is basically built on a back end, and it's very similar to how we would do like our Rails routes and stuff. Yep. Any other thoughts? Did anybody take a look at this last one?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think about that? So like let's look at I don't know the Giphy one, right? So this is like our normal standard like JavaScript looking data. Then if we go in here, right? Oh no, that's weird. All right. Oh well.
I can tell you.
Yeah.
It was XML.
We'll scroll down. We'll go down here. So yeah, so it looks kind of like this, right? So this is XML. Yeah, exactly. So really, there are like two different types of data formatting that APIs use. There are others as well, but these are kind of the two main ones. So there's JSON. Do you have a question?
Yeah, how come your Giphy one looks different than mine?
Oh, right. Sorry, I meant to mention that. So a bunch of you guys probably have like a bunch like big ugly blocks of object and not like pretty looking stuff like this, right? At the bottom of the lesson plan, I linked where is it? In resources, wherever that might be. Here, there's a beautify your JSON in Chrome. It's just a Chrome extension. So yeah, maybe grab that like during our next break or something. Yeah, so XML is something that honestly I've never used. It kind of scares me a little bit because JSON just looks a lot nicer. Like this just seems a lot more reasonable, right? Like we know how to handle JavaScript objects, but XML is sort of is one of the, or I think is like sort of the older or more original API data source or data type. So it's still used in a lot of other places, but a lot of the applications that you might be getting an XML data request from have now also switched over to JSON, and they have both. So, for example, like that market one that's not working, they have both. You'll see they have both JSON and XML, right? So they have both. But in another sense, anyways, Kyra, you were saying the XML looks a little bit like HTML instead of JavaScript, right? So you can still parse it, but it's a little bit different. And again, I never really use it because it looks kind of scary to me. It looks really ugly and weird. So I try to avoid it as much as possible, to be honest. But if you come across it, now you know what it is. So where do we find APIs? I feel like I asked this question in one of the other classes I taught, like in jQuery plugins. I was like, where do we find this stuff? And the answer is always kind of the same thing. Yeah.
But I know most websites have like some sort of developer section
Yeah.
where you have the APIs and you have to request it.
Yep.
So like if it's a big business like a Google, more than likely they have it where developers can go and check out their APIs.
Yeah, and even at a higher level, like Google, right? Like you just Google, if you want like a beer API, like I know Patrick, you've used that before, like a beer API, you just literally Google beer APIs and like 6 of them are gonna pop up. So like, as you were just saying though, like almost every like organization, every like major organization has an API, right? And they have some sort of way that you can access their data for the most part. As it says here, even Marvel publishes an API. You guys can use like superhero data and stuff in whatever, if you guys are superhero fans. I'm gonna go into like a really sad story though real quick, just sort of a tangent. So sports data is like pretty proprietary. They don't really release that as much. So like ESPN had this great API site for a long time. And so like for my project 4, I was gonna do like this whole cool sports project and I was like really excited about it. So I go into ESPN here, right? So this is the ESPN developer site, and I'm like, yes, ESPN developer site, sweet, let's do this thing. And I'm like, APIs, yay, APIs, let's do it, more fun. Athletes, yay, athletes, this is great. And I was like super excited, looking around, I'm like, all right, cool, using the API, yay, more stuff. Like, so this is kind of standard documentation for using API. So I was like, awesome, I'm gonna crush this thing, this is great. And I was like, using APIs, woohoo, yeah. And then I was like, okay, now what? There's nothing here. There's just like some links and stuff. All right. So then I tried a few things and nothing worked. And I was like, all right, let's go back. Let's like start from the ground up. I was a little too excited. So getting started. Yay. All right, getting started. So I'm here and I'm like, all right, cool. It's not really telling me how to do this. All right. And so now like it says like, oh, you need your API key. Cool. And we'll get into that in a second. But it's like, oh, you need your API key. And I was like, all right, cool. How do I do that? So I'm searching. I'm like, give me the key. I'm looking around. And there's literally nothing here that's like, access your API key or generate an API key. And I was like, yay-ish. Not there yet. And I was like getting really sad. And I was like, okay, so maybe something's wrong. So I go back here, go back to the beginning, and they just inserted this little link here that's an important announcement. And you go here and it's just like, oh, BT Dubs, as of December 8th, 2014, we've completely stopped all of our API service. And I'm like, why do they even have the rest of this site? If they like this is a year and a half ago now, and they still have it up. And it's like I spent hours being like, this is awesome, I'm gonna crush this. And then I didn't. But it's cool. Project 4 turned out well anyway, so we're good. No worries. We're cool. Huh? Oh yeah, good question. So side note, another tangent, when it comes to your projects, right? I spent a long time worrying about like getting the right data and like kind of like again for your project too, right? A lot of you guys like just created random data, right? That's exactly what you want to do. Because I spent a long time wasting time trying to access data like that and didn't really come across it. So I literally just used hard-coded data for my project because for me, my project 4 wasn't about can I connect to an API. My project 4 was about can I use like D3 and Angular. So I wasted a bunch of time on it and then I was like took a step back and realized that wasn't the right move. So just as a side note, when you guys are going forward, functionality over ESPN. Anyway, so that leads me into so the next kind of important thing. What is an API key? Anyone tell me, what is an API key? Yeah.
It's kind of like when you use any API from the site, you need to sign up your account, and then they give you a key to use.
Yep.
You plug it into the URL.
Yeah, so why would they have an API key though? What's the point of
I just figure it's annoying to send emails.
it? Could be. That could be part of it. But there's kind of a more important reason, I think. Patrick, you have theory?
I was just going to guess so that not anyone can access the data, so you have to, I guess, sign up with the site or something.
Yeah. So it's more of a security thing. Yeah. So a security thing and a cost thing, right? So a lot of APIs, you don't want to just make it completely public because then people can just keep pinging your server over and over, right? And as you guys know, like so we all deploy our apps to Heroku, right? So there's a certain limit that you can use Heroku. Right? There's a certain amount of apps you can put on it, and there's a certain amount of server space you can use for each of those apps, right? It's the same thing for any major company or anything else. They all have a limited amount of server space, and the more times people ping that server, the more likely they will get to that limit where like it's going to start costing more money. They're going to have to pay more to actually use those servers. They're going to have to add more memory onto that or whatever, right? Your question?
Well, yeah. Would it also be because I'm thinking like if you're a big company like Apple or Google, that you kind of want to know, even though it's so many people, you kind of want to know who's using your stuff, so that it's like they use it in the wrong way or something like that. You can say specifically, "Hey, John Doe."
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. Yeah, there are a lot of companies or a lot of web apps that you are like going to be connecting to their API. A lot of them will actually have a form that you fill out that says like, "What are you using this for?" Right? So. Another funny example for my projects, similar to Maureen, who's not in this classroom, my project 3 was about kind of complaining about the DC Metro, and I connected to the DC Metro API. And so in the description, I wrote a nice forum where people can post about the Metro. And then my app was literally called Trans Shit, because it was all about like saying terrible things about the Metro. But I didn't really want them to know that, so I just went for it. Whoever's listening, don't need to repeat that to Amada. It's fine. Anyway, so anyway, that's another really big point, right? Is like API keys are used so that the developers from like Giphy or something like that know who's using it, getting their email and stuff, knowing who's using it and why. That's exactly right. So let's just take a look real quick. What happens? What do you guys think is going to happen if we click here where there's no API key? So Giphy requires an API key, and admittedly, this one's public. So they actually just have one. So you'll see here, it's posted right here, right? I have it in this link. They have it public. If you go to the Giphy website, which I think I linked somewhere, if you go to it, they literally just post their API key anywhere. It's literally just like so people have to go to their site to grab that key first. What do you think would happen if I click on this right now? Error, Brian?
It would take you to their website.
Close. So it is going to give me an error. It's going to just tell me forbidden, right? It's just going to not give me anything. So I wanted to pull up a search for funny cat, and now it's just giving me forbidden. So if we do the exact same thing but add in the API key here, now all of a sudden we get all of the GIFs that correspond to the search term funny cat. Yeah.
What would stop me from just using the API key that you have right there?
Nothing, actually. And so that's what I was just saying. Specifically, that's why I'm using Giphy as an example, because this API key is public anywhere. So like if you go to the Giphy website and you go to like their API section, it's literally posted like first thing. But there are other apps that I probably would not show you my API key, not because I don't trust you guys, but because I don't want it published to GitHub. And that leads me to this very important part. It is very important to not publish your key to GitHub. So there are a lot of ways around that, and one specifically is Figaro. If you guys want to kind of dive into it a little bit later, I would suggest looking into it. But yeah, so it's really important not to publish your API keys to GitHub. And I preface that with there are some, again, like Giphy, where it's all public, so it's not really a big deal, right? As you see, this is literally on GitHub right now. But a lot of other ones, if you register for that key, right? So like one of the best examples or biggest examples is Amazon Web Services. If you register for one of their secret keys and you publish it to GitHub, they're kind of like trolls and people like who just like literally just troll GitHub, and they will search for people's repos for the word API key, right? And if they find that, they will grab whatever comes after that and just start implementing it. And they'll start dinging Amazon's server with your API key over and over and over to the point where you're going to start getting charged. Because you have an Amazon account, right? They have all your information, and you went through your account to register for that API key. And if you push it up to GitHub and someone else starts using it over and over, Amazon's going to think you're the one that did it. And they're going to start charging you. So it's very, very important to not publish your API key. So like they will literally send you a bill for thousands of dollars and be like, you used up a lot of our server space. Here's a $10,000 bill. Yes?
So every time you use one of these things, you're taking like a little smidge of their server when you run whatever you're doing?
Yep, the same thing as what you guys are doing with Rails, right? So like when you made a post request or a get request to your Rails site, right? You were literally going to /artists, and then you were pulling anything from /artists. You were like posting the data from /artists, right? That was your route. Exact same thing. You're going to api.giphy.com/ all this stuff, and that is where they're storing their data, and you'd be pulling it out and putting it onto your browser.
Why do they do this?
Why do they do?
Like, why do they have these for people?
I think it's exactly what you were saying before, where I would say it's mostly like an ease thing, right? So like you don't want to have to recreate your data all the time, right? So like you don't want to just keep recreating data over and over and over. One sec, sorry. So like people are publishing their data for you to use. It's in theory it's a risk. Like it could cost them more money. But at the same time, like think about so I'm gonna go back to ESPN, even though that's a kind of crappy example given that they shut down their developer site. But think about if you were using ESPN's data, right, and all of a sudden you started getting a bunch of followers on your site, right? At some point you start paying ESPN because all of a sudden your site is getting pinged so many times, it's pinging their server a lot. So there's like a certain level where like if you start using that site a lot, they'll start charging you, and then they're making money off of you. So there's in theory there's a bit of a risk, but at the same time there's also a monetary gain for a lot of these companies. Do you have a question?
I was going to ask what the incentive is for these big companies.
Yeah, a lot of it is that like there's a certain point where like when your product is in production and you're using their API, you start paying them. You can't just use it for free all the time. Again, admittedly, I certainly have never built an app that's going to be paying enough times to start paying any money, but who knows? Yeah.
Couldn't you technically just ping their API, copy all of their data, and put it in a file, and then just use that so you don't have to pay them?
Sure, but what happens when the data changes? Then you have to do it all over again, right? So like think about ESPN, right? There's a game every day. So if you want to do like baseball data or something, right? Again, I'm gonna stop using ESPN since they suck. Let's go to whatever. Let's do like Giphy or something, right? Like what if Giphy starts adding more funny cat gifs, right? Like, and you want all the funny cat gifs. You'd have to like go back and copy it all again. You don't even know, like, they might not put it all in order of when it's been added either. So they might just be inserting gifs randomly in their data. So like being connected to it makes it a lot easier to be able to know what's new and what's been added in. Yeah.
I would also think that business-wise, like, you would get tired of people constantly requesting information from you. Because
Yeah.
when you're that popular, I'm sure people want to be able to keep stats of certain things.
Yeah,
or,
for sure.
So I think it would kind of lessen the stress from them if they can just create something that you can automatically get. All they have to do is just approve your application and be done with it.
Yep, absolutely. You have a question?
No, I was gonna say, wouldn't that be like an added benefit that you get to control what data anybody has access to? Since everybody's kind of tunneling in to see your data and share it on their site.
Yeah.
This way you get to control that everybody has the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, so during my project 4, I then moved on, after ESPN didn't work out, I moved on to Yahoo, which, side note, also didn't work out, but that's for another reason. But they keep their data like split up in like a bunch of different, what they call documents, right? And so like if you want like player data, you can grab player data from one place, but then like the players' names and stats are in like another place. You have to go to all these different places. And so they keep it very separate, and they make it really difficult to get. But yeah, so like they control how you access their data and like basically the complexity of doing it. Yeah. Did I see someone else's hand? Yeah, Andrew.
So then, okay. So API is basically sort of the key is like a link to request to use data from another source.
Yep.
So there's almost there is kind of like is there almost like an intellectual property component to it where it's like it's not really yours, but it's like this link lets you use it to a degree
Yep.
until the server reaches some like kind of threshold.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's pretty common practice. Sort of like, you know, if you're writing an essay in high school or something, you do like the footnotes and you like reference whoever you're citing. Pretty similar to this. I think common practice would be like in your GitHub repo or even in like your about section of whatever app you're building. You would mention, you know, this data is coming from Giphy or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, you would give them the credit for it and you'd maybe link to their API site or something like that as well. Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about Ajax real quick, and then I'm going to send you guys on break for a minute. So now we know what an API is. So now we need to start figuring out what to do with it. So Ajax is an Ajax request is a jQuery method that that allows us to make client-side API calls. So what that means, again, as I said in the beginning, is it allows us to not like go into our server and like go through all the server-side stuff we did in Rails and like grab stuff from the database and post it on the page. It allows us to literally stay client-side. So like the client does everything. They hit like get funny cat, right? And then it goes off, like our request goes off to Giphy, comes back, posts it on the page without refreshing the page at all. Right? It might take a second because like we're still going to another application or site, but it does all that for you without refreshing the page. So Ajax allows us to kind of dynamically manipulate our browser and post that data, get the data, and then like present it onto our browser. So the nice thing about it is it also comes with all the kind of typical HTTP requests that we're used to, right? So it allows us to get, it allows us to post, put, patch, and delete, depending on the access that we have for a given API. So before we go on break, so like kind of just to preface what we're going to get into afterwards, I'm going to run through an example of going through just like an external API, like doing a GET request to an external API, right? And then fun for you guys, we have a whole nother tuner for you guys to work with. Where, yeah, I know, right? Great. But yeah, so basically, you guys are going to work through doing a GET request, and then we have kind of like a Rails API built there that you can then connect to. It's like, technically it's going to be local to you guys, but it's the same process as if you're using an external API. But this allows you to have access and then post, put, and delete as well. So we're going to go through the whole process. We're going to run through all the code. But first, I'm going to let you guys go on a 10-minute break. So can we come back at 10:46?